Hello, and welcome back to episode 11 of the Asian Peace Talks, a podcast launched by the Asian Peace Program of the Asia Research Institute at the National University of Singapore. I'm Kishore Mahbubani, the host of the Asian Peace Talks. For this episode, we are delighted to interview Ambassador Shivshankar Menon, one of the most distinguished practitioners and scholars of Indian foreign policy. Ambassador Menon is a distinguished fellow at the Center for Social and Economic Progress, CSEP, a visiting professor at Ashoka University, and chair of the Ashoka Center for China Studies. Ambassador Menon has also served as the National Security Advisor to the Indian Prime Minister and as Ambassador and High Commissioner of India to Israel, Sri Lanka, China, and Pakistan. He's also the author of two very significant books. The first is Choices, Inside the Making of Indian Foreign Policy, which was published in 2016. And the second is India and Asian Geopolitics, the Past, Present, published in 2021. So, Shankar, it's a great pleasure to invite you to the Asian Peace Talks.
Thank you, Kishore. Thank you for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you. As you know, our primary topic today will be on the relations between India's relations with China, Pakistan, and ASEAN. But I thought, given recent developments, our listeners might also be interested in knowing what is the current state of India's relations with the United States. As you know, in a span of 24 hours between July 30th and July 31st, President Trump publicly expressed his frustration with India over 3 social media posts. And after announcing a 25% tariff on India, President Trump also criticized India over its relationship with Russia, its membership of BRICS, and its refusal to open its domestic economy to the US, and ending with calling India a dead economy. Frankly, that is the most unfair thing you can say about India's economy, which is, by the way, for the record, one of the fastest growing the fastest growing major economy in the world. So my question to you is an obvious one. What has led to this sudden outburst from President Trump, and what does this signal about the state of US-India ties?
Well, I think only President Trump can give you a definitive answer to why he did this. But it's of a piece with his behavior in other negotiating situations, where he raises the bar, makes general statements and threats, and then, because we are in the midst of the negotiation of what could potentially be a very significant bilateral trade agreement between India and the US. And I think both sides have made a real effort. The US team is supposed to be coming to India again this week for these talks. I assume that this is part of Mr. Trump's negotiating tactics, that this is part of that. But the fact is that there are issues in the relationship, and there has been a fair amount of commentary in India about how to deal with this new United States that we are all now facing. Because I frankly think that what we're seeing is not the old United States, the old liberal globalist sort of trend in US foreign policy, and those who pushed it are no longer in power. And we are seeing a very different United States at work. So I think it will take a while before we reach a new equilibrium. But I'm basically optimistic about the relationship. I think Mr. Trump has several interests. He's very keen on his Nobel Peace Prize, and therefore has repeatedly said that he brought peace between India and Pakistan after the crisis on the border, after the Pahalgam attack, and then our retaliation in May. In fact, he's claimed that he has done one peace agreement or ceasefire agreement every month for the last 5 months in the world, including Iran, Israel, etc. So I think, yes, he has his reasons for what he's doing. In India, the US is still our biggest trading partner, our biggest source of technology, the 4th largest source of foreign investment, and is a partner in terms of maritime security across the Indo-Pacific. And all that is going on steadily. She is a defense partner, but we have other defense partners as well. I think these are not monogamous relationships, and maybe that's why Mr. Trump expressed frustration about BRICS and about our relationship with Russia and so on. We'll have to see where this, but I think I see this as a period of flux, and I wouldn't jump to big conclusions and say this is permanent and this is going to last forever, or that it reflects the state of the relationship. Because the basic congruence between India and the US, and India's need for the US to transform India while we develop India,
mm,
and the US's strategic interests in India, which have been expressed in the transformation of the relationship over the last 3 decades, I think those remain.
mm,
And I don't think those have been changed. But the atmospherics, the way in which things are expressed, that clearly has changed in the US.
mm,
And but I don't think we should be swept off our feet by every tweet and every,
mm,
we are in the social media age, and frankly, people say things more for
mm,
effect than I
mm,
think, and to grab eyeballs.
mm,
I mean, which of course for an older generation like mine is a bit strange, but I think younger people know how to deal
mm.
with it.
Well, I must say I'm greatly encouraged by your assessment that these tweets may not necessarily reflect any structural change in the U.S.-India relationship. And you're right, the major negotiations are yet to take place
But I
between
must
the
say
US.
that we are dealing with a new US. There is a cultural revolution going on in the US, and we don't know where that's going to settle.
Yeah,
So there is uncertainty at a much higher level than before in the relationship. But that's something that we are
yeah,
not going to settle ourselves. I don't think that ASEAN is going to settle it either.
yes,
We are observers in a sense, and
exactly.
we ride out the effects.
Yeah. I was going to ask you a quick follow-up question. I'm sure you've been following closely the articles by Ashley Tellis in the Foreign
Yeah.
Affairs. And as you know, he's just had a debate with Nirupama Rao and Dhruv Jaishankar in the pages of
Hmm.
Foreign Affairs. And both you and I read Foreign Affairs assiduously. Very quickly, Ashley Tellis is sort of basically making the argument that the US is disappointed with India. And that's
Hmm.
another front is, very different.
Yeah.
Can you just quickly react to that statement by Ashley Tellis before we move on? Not too long, just to give
I
so that the readers would understand that we are aware of this Ashley Tellis
yeah.
mention also, in
Actually,
addition.
what Ashley is saying is that in a way he's gone back to an earlier US approach, which was if you're not with us, you're against us.
Mm,
So you have to choose us
mhm,
over China, and you need to make that commitment. But the question then is, what is the US offering? The US is not offering an alliance or anything to India.
mhm,
So what does he mean when he says choose us?
mhm,
I'm not really sure whether he has thought this through,
mm,
except to say you must buy more US weapons. I
mm,
mean, that's good for the US industry, defense industry, okay. And if they suit us, we'll buy them. We have bought them in the past, but
mm,
they'll have to suit us. I think the rub is, and it's interesting, during the Cold War, for instance, the weaker side, the Soviets, said, as long as you're not against us,
mm,
we don't mind.
mm,
The stronger side, the US always said, if you're not with us, you're against us.
mhm,
You have to choose. I think we're seeing something similar today
mm,
between China and the US.
mhm,
Though China sometimes says that India has lost her independence and is too close to the
mm,
US, but basically, I don't think China makes the same demands
mm,
that the US makes. But Ashley represents one point of view in the US. It's not the most general point of view, and
mm,
it hasn't been traditional administration policy, certainly not under Bush, Obama, Biden,
mm,
and even under Trump 1.0.
mm,
So we'll have to see. It seems to me that US policy in the Asia Pacific, Indo Pacific is still evolving. I mean, you've seen Elridge Colby's testimony, what he
yes.
says about Taiwan. You've seen
Mm,
the review of AUKUS, you
mm,
know. So I see all this as attempts by various parts and various constituencies in the US to stake out policy positions and to gain a voice in the
Yeah.
policy process in the US.
Mm.
So I wish them luck in their attempt to arrive at a
Yeah.
new equilibrium and a policy. But I think it's too early to say that we know what
Yeah.
the Asia-Pacific or Indo-Pacific policy, especially maritime Asia, I'm not sure
Yeah.
that we can say we know the policy.
Yeah.
Because the big elephant is, of course, US-China relations.
That's right. I
And
would
we're
say
getting contradictory signals on that.
what I deeply appreciate in your responses is that you bring in the larger geopolitical picture, and you also bring in a very important historical dimension, which is often missing in the discussions. But I'm also glad you mentioned China in the course of your response on Ashley Tellis, because I think we can move on to the China-India relationship. And as we know, in October 2024, China and India reached a landmark border agreement, and that agreement led to a disengagement of troops to positions prior to the Galwan clashes of June 2020, which, as we all know, set back China-India relations significantly. So, how do you assess overall the current state of the bilateral relationship between China and India today,
I
following the
think,
border agreement?
yeah, I think parts of the relationship are still clearly under stress.
Mm,
Especially, I would say, on the border, because we haven't quite restored the status quo as it was before the 2020 clashes.
mm,
And we don't have the kind of comfort of the various CBMs and other measures we had in place, which were working
mm,
for almost 30 years, which kept the border basically peaceful and where it
mm,
was, exactly as it was, without fundamental change.
mm,
That changed in 2020. So that part of the relationship is still under stress, but both sides are working on that and
mhm,
are trying to deal with it. It's not an easy, territory is never an easy
mm,
issue to deal with, and especially because the present government in China treats it as a matter of territorial integrity and sovereignty, not just as, oh, this is a dispute which we have to settle. A dispute means you can give and take.
mm,
But if you treat it as a matter of territorial integrity, then it becomes much harder to give,
mhm.
easy to take, but not so easy
Yeah.
to. So I think that part both sides are addressing and are taking their time about
Mm,
dealing with it. But if you look at the economic relationship, it's booming. I mean,
mm,
every other year, China is our biggest trading partner. In goods, they still are.
mm,
And if you look at, I mean, we did $135 billion worth of trade. There is disquiet in India because the imbalance is very
mm,
clearly in China's favor. Uh, and there is talk of how do we actually improve that relationship.
mm,
I think we are now looking at, well, for one thing, we've reopened business visas and so
mm,
on and travel between the two countries.
mm,
But we're also looking, and there has been suggestions from business and by the economic advisor to government that we should permit Chinese investment in India in
mm,
various fields. BYD is interested, for instance, and it
mm,
makes sense because uh, we would convert then a trading relationship into one where both sides have stakes in
mm,
each other and in each other's economic prosperity.
mm,
So I think we are, therefore, if I have to describe India China relations today, I'll say we're in the middle of a reset. For
mm,
me, I am relatively optimistic if we do the right things
mm,
because clearly the old arrangements that we have broke down in 2020, and we
mm,
can't just go back. I mean, the world has changed. We have both changed. So for me, the answer would be a proper strategic dialogue where we discuss respecting each other's core interests,
mm,
settling, or if you can't settle, at least managing your differences,
mhm,
and where you can cooperate, which is a lot of things, especially on the economic side, but also on the international stage. There are a lot of common interests that we both
mm.
have, and to see what we can do together, and then work together accordingly to build the relationship back to a more predictable basis and to restore some trust in the relationship, because that's what really was lost in 2020
And recently there have been some high-level visits, I believe, by
from both
by
sides, yes.
Global and also Foreign Minister Jaishankar
Yeah.
to Beijing. Would you say that these visits have helped to at least improve the tone of the relationship?
Certainly, the atmospherics in the relationship and the desire on both sides to improve the
Mhm,
relationship. After the meeting between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Modi in Kazan last
mm,
October, when they both directed that both sides need to work to improve the relationship. I
mm,
think after that, we've seen a clear impetus to try and improve. Direct flights are going to be resumed. The Kailash Mansarovar Yatra pilgrimages are going to be resumed into Tibet.
mm,
In fact, this season. And so there's a whole host of things which are
mm,
slowly underway to try and bring the relationship back to normal, to normalize it, but also to make it more predictable and
mm.
restore trust.
Yeah. But we know the a lot of these steps I think are very important and can be done. But if you had to point to the structural issues that in some ways cloud the relationship, one is, as you have spelled out very clearly, is the border issue. And as you said, the Chinese have described it as an issue of territorial integrity. Are there other core issues that you would think in some ways bedevil the China-India relationship that have to be dealt with in one way or another?
I think each side has their own view of
Core interest. Yeah.
what's wrong. And
Mm,
I mean, from an Indian point of view, apart from the boundary, which,
mm.
as we saw in 2020, always has the potential of,
Very critical, yes.
yeah. But because these are new states, and
Mm.
nationalism is involved in territory, and
Yes, yeah.
so it's not something that you can just ignore. No, but I think there's two other things. The, our periphery is also China's periphery.
Mm,
So we are both very sensitive about what happens in our periphery. It affects
mm.
our security, it affects our livelihood, our prosperity, and we rub up against each other. And
So you
that is a
mean
problem.
your neighbors,
So
Bangladesh,
it
Pakistan,
more
Lanka.
even, and I mean in the 50s it was, this Chinese fear that Tibet would break away when the Dalai Lama came to India. So, and now, for instance, 38% of our trade goes through the South China Sea and the Taiwan Strait.
Mm-hmm.
So the Indian Navy patrols. Now that for the Chinese looks like, why is India in our periphery? And vice versa. I mean, we have the same issues of China's building Gwadar next to us and so on. But so we rub up against each other in the periphery that we both share. The other big issue, which I think is a more fundamental issue, is that to most Indians, it appears after the last 5, 8 years that China is the one great power which does not support the rise of India, that does not look kindly at India's rise.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's membership of the NSG, there's a whole host of issues like this, or the
Mm-hmm.
UN Security Council, et cetera, et cetera. On the Chinese side, about 5 years ago, Chinese scholars, even officials sometimes, started saying India is no longer non-aligned or neutral, that implying we've gone over to the dark side, to the US.
Mm.
Ignoring, of course, the fact that China used to be much closer to the US than we've ever been. But that's history. That's how history is used by all of us.
Yeah.
Uh, that I think that's one. The other thing is India also stayed clear and made clear her distrust of several Chinese initiatives, like the BRI, for instance,
Mm.
which had very high level support. I mean, and so, and many, especially BRI in the periphery, I think. So
Mm.
there are structural issues here.
Mm.
But the interesting thing is, despite 2020, and yes, there's been some decline in favorability
Mm.
among Chinese on India and Indians on China,
Mm.
but it's climbing back up over the last 2, 3 years.
Mm.
And I think both sides understand that the economics of it actually drive us together.
Mm.
And you look at the world situation, I
Mm.
mean, that is surely the best motive to work
Yeah.
together, the
Yeah.
uncertainty in the world situation.
I'm glad you mentioned the third point being that China's uncomfortable with India's rise. And in some ways, this goes against the Chinese view that the world is a better place when you have a multipolar world. In fact, the Chinese always say that they welcome a multipolar world. They would like to
They
see that.
used to say, I haven't heard it in the last 2 years.
Oh.
In fact, what I hear from the Chinese now is that China is a factor for stability and progress
Mm.
and is the only upholder of the post-World War II international order left.
Hmm.
which is slightly different from
Hmm.
saying that we're for a multipolar world. I think they used to say it, yes,
Hmm.
but I have not heard an authoritative statement along those lines for some time.
Hmm. It shows
I'd
you
be
that I'm.
interested.
It shows
No,
you that
no,
I'm
no,
behind
I
time.
could be wrong. I could be very wrong. Maybe I'm
Uh,
just not listening.
if if my memory is correct,
They used
my
to.
private conversations with the Chinese, they do still talk about
Yeah.
a multipolar world, and from
Mhm.
their point of view, also a multipolar world opens up space for China in many parts of the world,
You know,
rather than a
governments love multipolar, including our government,
yes.
because it flatters them to say they are a present or
Mm.
future pole.
Hmm.
And they project this to their own people as their
Hmm.
success.
Yes, yes.
And so, if you look around the world, it's amazing how many people speak of a multipolar world
Mm.
without ever defining what it means
Mm.
and or defining whether it's actually in our
Mm.
interest.
Yeah. So I think there are many areas in which clearly, like for example, when the Chinese say they are now the defender of the 1945, whatever it is, from Spain.
Post-World War II order.
In fact, most countries in the global south want this to continue. And it's better for China to work with other stakeholders in this order, including India. So one can see that if you had wiser counsel on both sides, they could find ways and means of approaching each other to working towards a global order that benefits both their countries. I mean, it's conceivable.
This is why I say we need a proper strategic dialogue, which also looks at how do we work together in the world,
Yes, I
and what
completely
kind of
agree
world
with
do we
you. A
want?
high level strategic
But
dialogue.
it's a high-level strategic dialogue, and it has to be fundamental. It can't be just,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, I think that's the goal of our Asian Peace Program, to keep
mhm.
probing and looking for ideas or processes that can make a difference. And I completely agree with you that the time has come for a high level strategic dialogue between China and India. And as you know, the rest of Asia would be
Yeah,
happier to see a stable, comfortable relationship between China and India rather than the one that's
that we have.
uncomfortable. But just before closing the chapter on China, do you see any low hanging fruits of cooperation that China and India can pursue? And just for your information, I've been asked to write an essay, surprisingly, for the opening of the World Health Assembly.
Oh, good.
And surprisingly, and so I suggested that one way of improving global health cooperation is for the two leaders of global health in the developing world, China and India, to cooperate together.
Mhm.
That's the theme of
Yeah.
my essay. So I
Makes
wonder if
sense.
that's an example of a low-hanging fruit that they
It
could.
makes sense. It
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense.
Hmm.
This is one. The other is actually in agriculture. There is a lot we can
Ah,
do. We are
okay.
the two biggest buyers of fertilizer on earth.
Wow. Oh, I
And
didn't know
so,
that.
so if we both go to market, we actually do each other in
Uh-huh.
because we drive prices through the roof. No,
Hmm.
there's a whole host of areas where actually we
Hmm.
have common interests.
Ah, good.
And which I believe that
So
if you
health,
actually
agriculture.
health, agriculture is one, education is another,
Hmm. Oh, yes,
where
yes.
where I think there's a
Scope.
lot to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Public health actually is a great area, as you
Hmm.
said. The
Yeah.
ones that cause trouble, because you were asking earlier,
Hmm.
are things like water,
Hmm.
because China is upstream on the
Hmm.
Brahmaputra and most of the rivers, the big rivers, Indus
Hmm.
and so
Yeah.
on, the Satluj, come out of Tibet.
Hmm.
And there is this fear, not all of it rational, but this fear that, they could stop it. The same way Pakistan is nervous that India could stop the water. Though,
Hmm.
frankly, if that's a physical impossibility
Hmm.
without a huge investment.
Yes. Yeah. So,
But
I mean, the good news is that there is scope
there is.
for China and India to improve their relationship. As I said, certainly much of Asia will welcome it.
Yeah.
Let me now turn to a more delicate relationship, the India-Pakistan relationship.
Uh,
And as sadly as we know, we've had a major tragedy this year, and I was shocked to see the pictures of the civilians being killed. I saw it on video, as everybody did, 20
Mhm.
civilians died. And clearly, terrorism is a major issue, and one can understand why India is deeply, deeply concerned about it. But the outcome, as you know, was a conflict between India and Pakistan that lasted for 4 days. And clearly, this is a very sensitive issue. So, how do you see any hope for India and Pakistan to try and improve their relationship? Bearing in mind there have been not, by the way, this what happened recently was one of many setbacks over several decades now. So, against that backdrop, how does one work towards improving the relationship with India and Pakistan?
Can I say something? India, Pakistan, Clinton called it the most dangerous relationship on earth.
Mm,
People have predicted doomsday for India, Pakistan for a long time.
mm,
And yet, if you actually look at our behavior, when we've got into trouble,
mm,
we've pulled back from the brink
mm,
each time. Even when we went in and hit Pakistan after the Pahalgam attack and
mm,
chose to hit terrorist camps and
mm,
infrastructure. We
mm,
didn't touch the Pakistan military. Pakistan
mm,
chose to escalate, and then, of course, we hit
mm,
Pakistan military air bases and so on.
mm,
But but at each stage, both sides made it quite clear, okay, that's it. We've done our bit. When the Pakistanis got an Indian pilot the last round
mm,
in 2019 on their hands, within 24 hours, they returned him to India.
mm,
They didn't want it to escalate.
mm,
So I think we must not assume that both sides are irrational or illogical.
mm, mm,
But what's happening here is that we have an antagonistic relationship where terrorism is and has been for many years an instrument of Pakistani army state policy. I'm
mm,
not saying all of Pakistan, but
mm,
certainly the jihadi tanzims and the army work very closely together. And India has been looking for ways of either changing Pakistani behavior, but if that is too optimistic, to at least deter what
mm,
Pakistan is doing using various means. I mean, not just military means, but also diplomatic, financial, other,
mm,
whatever means it can, covert, overt,
mm,
across the board. Or at the very least, to impose a cost
mm,
for the use of terrorism as state policy.
mm,
And I think that's what we've been saying. But all these Cassandras who predict doom and, oh, India, Pakistan, the nuclear states are on the brink and so on, we're not idiots. I
mm,
mean, I think both sides are rational.
mm,
And both sides have a very strong instinct in self-preservation.
mm,
That doesn't mean they won't use it to
mm,
develop other relationships. Pakistan has a habit of charging strategic rent, making herself useful to other
mm,
bigger powers because she needs to balance what she sees as Indian preponderance,
mm,
whether it's China, whether it's the US, and so on.
mm,
Uh, but fine, I mean, but if you look at the band within which we've operated over the last 20,
mm,
25 years,
mm,
it's a fairly limited band. And all these dire predictions, the most dangerous place, oh, on the brink, about to
mm,
explode. Uh,
mm,
I mean, I think most of them are made by either people who think they'll get a Nobel Peace Prize out of it,
mm,
or by those who think they might have a role in
mm,
mediation and are looking to look good on
mm.
the international stage.
Yeah.
But I have much more faith in South Asians, in Pakistanis and Indians, I think, and in our own agency.
Well, I must say that is the probably the most encouraging thing I've heard about the India-Pakistan relationship, and I'm
Well,
very happy. I'm very happy to hear it. I mean that that
but
that,
let me add one
that on
thing.
both sides there a very clear understanding of what are the rational limits that
But
can.
let me add one thing. The problem is that in both sides, domestic politics
Mm-hmm,
supports an antagonistic policy.
mm-hmm,
In fact, finds it is useful to the ruling elites to have a certain level of antagonism, controlled antagonism,
mm-hmm,
managed hostility,
mm-hmm,
but hostility. That's not a happy state. And
mm-hmm,
that's why you will keep getting these
mm.
incidents and you go through this dance.
Yeah. So when, if at some point in time, I think, as you know, we've had many cases of countries that had antagonistic relationship for centuries, like let's say France and Germany or UK and Germany.
Mhm.
And at some point in time, they were able to rise above it for various historical reasons, and partly because of World War II, But if India and Pakistan want to turn the corner and say, okay, let's maybe try to move towards a less antagonistic relationship, I don't see them coming towards peace and harmony like two old buddies. That's not going to happen. But if you wanted to, in a sense, lower the temperature in the India-Pakistan relationship, what are the sort of steps, practical steps that can be taken to try and sort of, as I say, turn the volume down in the antagonism between the two sides?
It seems to me that part of the problem is that Pakistan is a very new state, still building its sense of nationhood. And we might have got our independence from the British, but the Pakistanis got their independence from India.
Mm-hmm.
And their sense of nationhood is also built in many ways on some antagonism with India. But that doesn't mean, and Pakistan still has to settle its own political contract and social contract within itself. But that doesn't mean that we are doomed to have bad relations all the time, because not all of Pakistan is invested in this kind of hostility. Yes, the jihadi tanzims and the Pakistan army, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
But Pakistani civilian politicians? No. Pakistani businessmen would benefit from a much more open and better relationship.
Mm-hmm.
The ordinary Pakistani populace also. I mean, I've lived there for 3 years. And I don't see that kind of hostility among the populace or
No,
on
you're
either
right.
side.
You know,
So for me, the answer right now, because Pakistan is still in the process of state formation and building
mm-hmm.
nationhood, the answer really lies in what Manmohan Singh used to say, make borders irrelevant. Don't try and change them. Because you try and change borders, then sovereignty, territorial integrity, then you're attacking their nationhood.
Mm-hmm.
But you make them irrelevant. You let trade, travel, pilgrimage, let people deal with each other the way and it makes sense
No,
economically. And, whether it's energy,
mm,
it makes sense. Whether it's, if you look at cotton, they grow the cotton, we have the factories, and actually you could take a
mm,
shirt across the border 5 times and produce a
mm,
much cheaper shirt for the rest of the world.
mm.
Uh, so there is a lot that can be done
Yeah,
if both sides actually put their minds to it. But as I said, domestic politics today
mm,
uh, doesn't seem to support it. We did that between 2003, 2007,
mm-hmm.
and were very successful. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
in December 2004, something like 10,000 Pakistani school children spent
Mm-hmm.
their holidays and homestays in India, which means that their parents trusted Indian families with their children.
Mm. I didn't know what this. By the way, I was going to say
So,
to
so
you.
it tells you something about how complex this relationship is.
Mm. I was going to say to you, you're absolutely right about the people-to-people relationship. I was ambassador to UN for over 10 years, and I would attend so many New York social gatherings with bankers. And if you go to a Citibank function, like you'll meet Shaukat Aziz, for example.
Yeah.
You meet all these Indians and
Oh,
Pakistanis
Shaukat, I know
working
very well,
together
actually. He was
at
prime
very,
minister when I was there.
yeah, I would see Indians and Pakistanis
Yep.
working together at close quarters, and then after the work, they would go out and they would speak the same language, eat the same food, and enjoy each other's company so much.
But
So
Kishore,
it's
that's part of
amazing.
the problem because we know each other's bad thoughts. We are too similar.
No, but I can tell you that the conviviality
Yeah, it's
between the
amazing.
Indian and Pakistan overseas communities was quite shocking to me. I mean, I look at this group laughing, joking, drinking, and then I would say, "What's all this trouble between India and Pakistan?" Yeah, these people are having a wonderful time, and as you know, cricket would also bring them together. So in a sense, that's the paradox about the India-Pakistan relationship. I think I'm really glad you mentioned Prime Minister Manmohan Singh's ideas, because I think he was clearly a man who was dedicated to trying to do something to improve the relationship. What else? What are the other kind of low hanging fruit you could point to as potential ways and means of maybe trying small step by small step, small step by small step to improving the chemistry of the relationship a bit?
I actually am saying that we in South Asia
Mm,
have an opportunity because Adam too says we are in a poly crisis, right? We've had
mm,
8 governments change in the last 4 years, not all of them constitutionally or happily.
yeah.
We have 4 countries who are in adjustment programs or discussing adjustment
Mm,
programs. The IMF, Sri Lanka defaulted in
mm,
22. Uh, they're all going through internal social and other change. I mean, their political systems, their political contract is being
mm,
renegotiated. So we have a moment here when, yes, it's a crisis,
mm,
where we can actually, well, flee forward, as the French say.
mm,
Like India did in 1991, we had an existential balance of payments crisis.
mm,
So we changed our economic policy fundamentally. We did the things that we
mm,
knew we should do,
mm,
but we found difficult in normal times.
mm,
But today, South Asia is in crisis, and this is the time when you can actually put into place habits of
mm,
cooperation, whether it's on currency,
mm,
whether it's on trade,
mm,
whether it's, I mean, there's a lot connectivity, opening it up, inland waterways, for
mm,
instance, energy trading. I mean,
mhm,
these are things that, and the infrastructure is increasingly available because it's been built over the last 15, 20 years.
mhm,
So I think actually we have a moment where I think India-Pakistan may be the most difficult for the reasons I
mm,
mentioned, domestic
mhm,
politics. But if you look at it as the region as a whole, the Indian subcontinent as a whole, I think we have a moment of opportunity, which I hope we have the sense to take.
mhm. This, what's very quickly, I know this is a complicated subject, but just very quickly, you do have the South Asian Association of Regional
We
Cooperation, which
we
has,
should get it going again.
but
We should
how
start it up.
can we jumpstart it again, you think?
Yes, we can. We certainly can. And there's nothing in SARC that says that if 2 people don't get along, the rest can't cooperate.
Hmm. So I hope that that can be at least one way of looking for
For
easy steps.
and the tougher the rest of the world gets, the more the incentive to do something in your own home.
Yes.
We should learn from ASEAN.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned ASEAN because ASEAN was going to be the next and last subject of our discussion today. And as you know, traditionally, ASEAN and India have enjoyed a very close relationship. And I can remember to this day how happy the Prime Minister of Singapore, then Prime Minister of Singapore, Mr. Goh Chok Tong, was when he managed to get India into this dialogue partnership with ASEAN in the mid 1990s. I was with him at
Mhm.
that famous bank meeting in Thailand, I think, that
Yeah,
decided on it. But that's already now almost 30 years. It's hard
yeah,
to believe.
a long time.
And since then, of course, India's place in the world has gone up dramatically. In 1995, you were not in the top 10 economies in the world. Now you're in the top five. Soon you'll be the top three. So the whole India-ASEAN relationship also, in some ways, has structurally changed. And here, in this regard, as first, I was going to ask you, broadly speaking, what is the current view of in India of ASEAN? And to be honest with you, part of this is also this question is also prompted by a recent comment by the Indian Commerce Minister Piyush Gupta, who said that ASEAN was
Goel.
China's
Oh no, yeah,
meeting.
that doesn't make sense.
That must say it caused a lot of shock waves in ASEAN, you
Oh,
know.
I'm sure it did. It's hardly and it's not true.
Uh,
It's just not true. So frankly, again, I assume that it was said for effect, for
mm,
some, but I find that really, really, it doesn't make sense. And certainly that's not India's policy.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, my
But
own when I was
but I think
permanent secretary.
where India-ASEAN relations have suffered, I think,
Mm,
is because for the last few years, there has been a very strong debate within India about actually opening up the economy and integrating into the world economy.
mhm,
And I think the problem started when we walked away from the RCEP
mm,
negotiations.
mhm.
And
What's your view on
I
that? Should
think
India join
I
us?
think it was a mistake. I think we should have gone in. We should have negotiated terms. We had 20 years to adjust,
Mm,
and we could have negotiated terms which worked for us.
mhm,
And I can't believe that if the other economies who joined RCEP didn't see it as destroying their economies, why should we be so sensitive? Or what makes us, therefore, somehow much weaker and so on than the others? No, I didn't see the logic in that. But as I said, that's been a debate which is going on. It seems to me that some of the trade, the destruction of the multilateral trading system, which we are now seeing, thanks to the Trump tariffs and to the various, and basically the destruction of the MFN system, which we are witnessing, and the death of WTO. I think this maybe has promoted, therefore, some fundamental rethinking within India also about how do we deal with the rest of the world. And I think we are probably going to do the right thing in terms of actually getting engaged and opening up and engaging with ASEAN. And the logical place for us to actually reach out and work together is ASEAN.
Yeah.
This is where the prospects are good. This is the most dynamic economic region in the world, east of us. And I don't see how we, as the only major economy which is outside all the big free trade, preferential free trade arrangements, we're not part of RCEP, we don't have a free trade agreement with the EU yet, we're negotiating with the US. So I think I sense there's a shift in the approach. I'm the same person that you mentioned, Mr. Goyal, Commerce Minister, has been saying that we need to get out there and start becoming part of global supply chains and open up the economy. We raised tariffs for the last 9 years running. But this year's budget, for the first time, there's been a break in that. So the science, I think we're at a moment where it can make a difference, where we can. But let's see. As I said, the more the uncertainty, people tend in uncertainty to actually crawl back into their shell, right? Rather than to go out and use the crisis.
The Peterson Institute of International Economics, PIE, I think you're familiar with them, highlighted in 2020 that India's income would increase by $60 billion annually if it joins RCEP and fall by $6 billion if it does not. So the cost benefits are very, very clear. And, I always say that the Indians are the most competitive economic animals in the world. You go to every city in the world, I guarantee you'll find an Indian businessman who's thriving and doing very well. Actually, it's the rest of the world who should be frightened of India opening up its economy rather than India be frightened of the rest of the world. But I'm very heartened to hear from you that there is.
I'm saying it's a moment of opportunity,
new
and I think there is thinking, but I'm not sure that it's translated into policy yet. I mean, there are people talking about it, but I'm not sure yet. I don't know enough.
Yeah. But here, I think this may be the moment to tie geopolitics to economics also.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, if you look at the past 2,000 years, Southeast Asia actually has had more Indian influence than Chinese influence, which is why 9 out of the 10 Southeast Asian states have an Indic base. And I was surprised to learn after I read William Dalrymple's book, The Golden Road, which I reviewed for Bloomberg, that the largest Hindu kingdom ever in human history was not found anywhere in India.
Not in India.
But in Cambodia, at the height of the Angkor
Jayavarman VII, yeah.
So, there's such deep historical ties, right? And it makes sense geopolitically also for India to play a bigger role in Southeast Asia. And so there is, in a sense, a coincidence of both economic and geopolitical reasons why India should do more with ASEAN, and historical reasons too. So that being the case, why isn't there a stronger pro-ASEAN constituency, you think, in India? What is missing there? Maybe it's ASEAN's fault. Maybe ASEAN hasn't done enough to cultivate India or something.
I really don't know. I don't have an answer. I think part of the problem is that, big countries like India, China, the US, and so on, they're so self-absorbed.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're making a very key point. Yeah.
It's a problem and I mean, there are professionals who look at these issues like you and me. But in a country like Singapore, the world is there in your face every day.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Whereas that's not the case for an Indian bureaucrat in Delhi.
Mm. But if you had to give advice,
Otherwise, but that's not an
to-
explanation actually, because it's in our interest
yeah.
to be involved. So I don't understand this. And
So what would you if you had to give some suggestions on how to build up the India-ASEAN relationship to a stronger level, apart from, of course, joining RCEP which will be welcome. And by the way, the important thing to emphasize, because I've heard so many Indians say that RCEP is a Chinese initiative. It is not.
it's
This is an
not.
ASEAN initiative, and it includes Japan, a
It came
US
out of
ally.
EAS.
It
We're the
includes South
ones.
Korea, a US ally. It includes Australia, a US ally. It includes New Zealand, a US
Well,
ally.
remember how long China took to sign on when it was first suggested in EAS by
Yeah,
ASEAN?
yeah,
It took a long time for China to actually agree.
yeah. They had their reservations too.
Yeah.
But in the end, they did. The Chinese did their
Calculation
cost-benefit
and yeah,
calculations,
yeah.
and they arrive, and that's why China ASEAN trade reached almost $1 trillion
Hmm.
in 2022. Just amazing,
Hmm.
amazing, almost $1 trillion. So that shows the potential also of the India ASEAN relationship. So do you have any closing thoughts on if you had to give some suggestions to our listeners?
Well,
What
I
should we
would
be looking
say,
out on the peace front?
I'd say don't waste a good crisis.
Ah, excellent.
Now is the time to go out and build peace, actually,
Yes. I
because
think
everybody is nervous, everybody is, so they'll be much more open to ideas
mm,
and willing to try things which otherwise in normal times might be difficult.
mm. Well, you're absolutely right. There is a remarkable degree of fluidity in the air that has been generated by many of President Trump's moves. And everyone is groping and trying to find a way to stabilize the situation. So this is the time for us to revisit all our old paradigms. And if, as a result of this podcast, we made a few suggestions for improving the China-India relationship, a few suggestions for improving the India-Pakistan relationship, and certainly the India-ASEAN relationship,
Mhm.
then I would say this podcast has done its job. So thank you very
Thank you.
much, Ambassador Menon, for joining us. And I want to conclude by saying that the Asian Peace Talks podcast is produced by Dr. Varigonda Kesava Chandra and Miss Kristen Tang and released by the Asian Peace Program, housed in the Asia Research Institute of the National University of Singapore. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kishore. Thank you very much.